meet you today. If you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us what genre of books you write, that would be great.
Yes, hello, my name is Tanya Ross, and I write dystopian young adult fiction. And yeah, I'm actually writing the second book in a series right now.
Exciting. So what is the age range that you would say your audience is best suited for?
I would say from grades 7 through 12. I've had sixth graders read it, and they do fine with it too. But just for the sake of the entire series, probably 7 through 12. And then adults really like it too. I've been surprised.
Oh, that's the big kid in them, I think.
Yeah.
And what made you choose this particular genre?
I was inspired by Lois Lowry's The Giver. I was an educator myself for over 30 years. And so I taught that book as a core novel in my English class. And at the time when I taught it, I had never even stumbled on anything like that before. So, since then, of course, there were tons of other things that came after it, but I just always thought it was a fascinating genre.
My kids love it, actually. That's their favorite. That's really what kick-started their love of reading was,
Really?
yeah, for sure. Fantasy, dystopian, a little bit of sci-fi, but they definitely gear towards your genre. So they're very excited to be reading your books.
Wonderful.
Yes. And how long have you been writing for?
Actually, this particular novel took me about 3 years to write because as a brand new novelist, it's a hard road. In other words, you don't really know what you're doing when you're sitting down to start a novel like that. So it was a lot of learning on my part and a lot of time that went into it. So now I feel like I have a little bit more understanding of what I'm doing. So the second novel is flowing a lot better. But yeah, it did take me quite some time.
And so the first draft, how long did it take you to do that?
I would say 2.5 years probably to get through that first draft.
Right. Wow. And that was because you were developing the characters and trying to figure out how to meld everything? Was that really why it took that amount of time?
Well, I just wanted to make sure that I was telling the story the way it needed to be told. And I'm not one of those people that sits down and does a lot of plotting ahead of time. I like to sort of see how the story evolves as my characters go forward. Yes. And so it's a little bit of guesswork as to where the character is going to take me. So I think because of that, it took me a little longer too.
I write with much guesswork. I have an idea about why I'm writing the story, but as for where the story goes, is very much about what's created in the moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it more exciting as a writer. A little longer, but it is more fun, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And then, so it was only 6 months to run through that edit process for you.
Right. Yes. I did have a group of kids that were my beta readers. And then I did have it edited. But probably one of the longest processes was finding a proper formatter, choosing a cover, doing all those things that I wasn't familiar with at all that needed to be done. So I had to learn how that worked.
Okay. And so share the book with us. What was the book that you wrote?
Okay, so I wrote this book. It's called Rising Up. But this is it. It is about a dystopian community, a city, where everybody's really happy because they have to be. They're monitored with a kind of like a smartwatch device, and their points for happiness determine how they rise up in the society.
Oh, I like that.
What kind of food they get, what kind of clothes they wear, all of that kind of thing, which is the basic premise. But then trouble begins because the main character's mom dies. She gets sick and she dies. And in this society, that doesn't happen. People don't get sick. They don't have these problems. So the main character has to figure out why this has happened and nobody's helping her. So that begins the conflict with the main character, and she has to uncover what might really be happening in this wonderful city in which they live.
Right. Oh, it sounds much like the culture within school.
Yes, definitely.
So that's really where you took your inspiration from?
Yes.
And so we just would like to ask you some tips that you'd like to offer for new writers. What would you give some tips for them?
Don't give up. Even though it may seem difficult at times and you have to go back and rewrite and rethink, don't give up. And secondly, you need to be disciplined. You need to be able to say, hey, I'm committed to this, so I'm going to sit down and I'm going to give this time like anything else that you do. You budget that time and you work through, that period. For me, it's a good 2 to 3 hours a day that I devote to my writing. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's important, whether it's 5 minutes or whether it's 20 or whether it's 2 hours. I think setting aside that time is important, because otherwise the book isn't going to get written. The story isn't going to get written. So that would be, I think, really important for kids to understand when they're starting to write anything.
I agree. And I know that certainly as a writer myself, it helps with the continuity to stay in the imagination, the creation of what it is you're creating and writing about. So if you take too much of a break from that, to catch up on what you've written is a lot of time. It can take a bit of time. Certainly for me. Do you find the same? If you've taken a bit of a break?
Yeah, and I actually miss my characters when I'm not with them. So it leaves kind of a hole, in my thinking or in my heart when I'm not producing more of their story. So I think that's another thing to keep in mind.
Oh, well, that's great. Well, thank you so much for the tips.
Yeah, I mean, I love working with kids. Like I said, I taught for over 30 years. It was primarily middle school, but I have a really strong appreciation for children and what they have to learn and what they have to go through on a day-to-day basis. And especially with COVID right now, I know it's very, very challenging. So hopefully there's some help out there for them as they get started in their studies.
Thank you for joining us, and I wish you much success with your book.
Oh, thank you.